continuing on in Calvin's Institutes, we see that the next accusation he needs to confront is this notion that the reformers were merely a conspiracy, a secret conspiracy that is meant to overthrow society as it is. That is, the good bar of custom of society, and plunge us into upheaval. That is to say, your conspiracy to mislead the masses. You're of Satan in that sense, and you're a conspiracy that is going to plunge us into another peasants' revolt or civil war. Calvin addresses this and say, look, there's society is never going to have a shortage of depravity. This is something we live with, and that happened on your watch, and yet you're laying it at our feet. No, no, no. We're for the Reformation and good structuring and ordering of society. And as we continue on in the Institute, you'll see that Calvin cast a grand vision for that notion. In fact, historians would say in early America that he was the founder in terms of the vision of American principles. But all that to say, that first one that he feels the need to address is this notion that it's a conspiracy theory. In essence, they're trying to overthrow societal norms and plunge the world into chaos. The one that he addresses immediately after that is that the reformers are saying, in essence, God allowed his church to die for an extended season. These reformers are crazy out of line. They're basically saying that the worship of the triune God ceased for decades or even centuries because our teaching was wrong. We were asleep at the wheel, whatever these charges are. The reformers are basically saying there was a dead church for any number of years. And Calvin says, whoa, whoa, no, we're not saying that. What we would say is that Christ always has his people, and Christ's people always need to worship. The Roman Catholic argument was, in essence, there must be a clearly visible church, a la Rome, and that there must be in Rome a see, a pope, a very clear and visible hierarchy. And Rome's argument is basically, if you don't have a clearly visible and in some sense opulent and flourishing church, is what Calvin gets into, then you don't have a real church. And if you don't have this hierarchy that we've established from popes, cardinals, bishops, and so on, then you don't have a real visible church. And Calvin says, okay, we have a misunderstanding in definition. Uh, we don't think the church was dead. We think the people were burdened. God's true people were burdened under what you were teaching and practicing. We believe that the church can be hidden and is still exemplified even in its hiddenness, or sort of being in the shadows, behind the scenes, in the wings of the stage, that the pure preaching of the Word of God and the due administration of the sacraments are what we say ordinarily define the visible church, not this sort of opulent, overblown hierarchy or anything else. He references back to 1 Kings 19:14, where Elijah is on the run and he says, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. That's Elijah in a moment of distress. The Lord's response is, look, Elijah, I've got 7,000 other people that are with me. They haven't bowed the knee to Baal. The church is fine, even as it was hidden from his own prophet's view. God knows his own people, and his own people worship, and therefore that constitutes the church. He gives the example of how God sustained his people in Babylonian exile, and a remnant was preserved. He gives the example that in terms of the witness prophetically of the reformers, that there was a multitude, often of false prophets, historically, that stood against true prophets. He gives Jeremiah 4:9 as the example, that courage shall fail both kings and officials, the priests shall be appalled, and the prophets astounded. And the reference essentially, Jeremiah stood alone against a multitude of false prophets in preservation of the true church of God. And are you saying Jeremiah was right? And in fact, just study your own history of councils. It's a mess. Look at Eugenius. So That's Calvin thus far. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed and profited from this.